Hello, everyone, and welcome to SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar on new small business federal funding program, update to the payroll protection program. I'm Mike Clem, a business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County, and I'll be your host today. Our presenter is Julio Casiano, Deputy District Director of the Connecticut District Office of the Small Business Administration. More on Julio in just a minute. But first, some brief information on SCORE. SCORE is a nationwide organization including over 11,000 volunteers with 320 offices around the country providing free advice to small business owners. SCORE is a part of the Small Business Administration. SCORE Fairfield County includes 130 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. We offer three primary value-added services to small business owners. First, we offer free one-on-one counseling, typically in the form of face-to-face telephone, email, and video, although right now it's all in a remote fashion. And it can be accessed via the Request Mentor link on our website or via the link you see here on the screen. Second, we offer educational workshops and webinars totaling over 150 programs yearly. Those also are currently in a remote only or webinar environment like we're doing today. And finally, we offer an extensive resources on our website, including a network of subject matter experts at your level. Our next webinar is this Monday evening, April 27th at 6 p.m. The topic is email newsletters, why it's worth the effort and how to get the most out of yours, with Belinda Wasser presenting. Look for the specifics on fairfieldcounty.score.org. Some useful information about today's webinar. We have set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. If you have a question, please use the chat window at any time during the presentation. It is located on the lower part of your screen. Our webinar will end sharply at 1 p.m. to respect your time. This session is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be available at fairfieldcounty.score.org within the next couple of days. Now, a word about our speaker. Our speaker today is Julio Casiano, Deputy District Director of the Connecticut District Office of the U.S. Small Business Administration. Julio began his banking career as a credit analyst with Bankers Trust in New York City. After moving to Connecticut in 1986, Julio worked for various banks in a wide range of key management roles. Since then, Julio has dedicated much of his professional energy to urban business development throughout Connecticut. I'll now turn it over to Julio. Julio, it's all yours.
So if my voice is clear, so I'll start now. And again, I want to thank the audience, especially the SCORE chapters that are on this call, Fairfield County for helping us put this together, the regional executive, Mark Cutler, who for the last couple of days we've been working on this presentation. That's how important it was to put it together and try to get at least some of the core information out that has been developing since the Payroll Protection Act was rolled out a couple of weeks ago. I just wanted to, again, just mention that this is still fluid. A lot of the information that's coming out in the next couple of days will be out shortly. So again, this was kind of introducing you to what we've been doing for the last couple of weeks, and then up to today, what's probably going to happen in terms of the final signature in the White House. But if you could do the next slide. This is really what has been happening since mid-March, as you've been reading and also listening on television and on the news. This is basically because of what we know has been happening with the COVID virus. Specifically amongst all the states. the initiatives that they've taken in terms of limiting businesses and restricting businesses from operating really drove these programs to be up and running pretty quickly. And when I say pretty quickly, I'm talking within days. And this program really covers the one where it's highlighted with the oval ring, which is the payroll protection program, and the EIDL program, the economic injury disaster loan, and the grants that were attached to it. I'll defer any other questions that pertain to the other parts of the CARES Act, because the PPP falls under what's known as the CARES Act. And so those are for the other professionals that could probably assist in answering any of those questions. But next slide. And just briefly, the total package, which includes everything that you just saw in the previous slide, is over $2 trillion, of which the portion that pertained to SBA in terms of doing the payroll protection program was roughly about $350 billion of that. And right now you are listening to the various airwaves about an additional funding that's coming down in terms of the $310 billion that's going to be attached to the existing money that had been depleted as far back as Thursday of last week. And so that information at that level right now, I know that the Senate passed a bill on Tuesday, Congress signed off on it yesterday, and hopefully we will have the third signature in the executive level through the White House under Trump that hopefully will come in today. And that would be the final signature we need in order to hopefully open up the payroll protection program as much as the EIDL program that we're also familiar with. Next. And as I had just mentioned, the original program, which goes back to the original bill, totaled about $350 billion. And if you get in terms of the scope and size of that amount of money, SBA really did not have I don't think that there's any organization that's out there that would have the ability to have that money literally funded to a diverse background of businesses within a short time. And that $350 billion really within 14 days, which ended last Thursday, was the time that it took to have that amount literally go from shore to shore. We're talking from all 50 states. And that effort really was because of the creation of the banking system here in this country, which allowed all the financial institutions, including credit unions, to be the conduit to have this money distributed in such a small, basically in 14 days. And so on top of that, what we're having now is that we need to have those programs refunded, because as of last Thursday, all of you have heard that the money has been depleted. And so the banks are kind of now in a waiting mode. Most of them are still processing those loans that had gotten approved by them. And what they're waiting now is for the spigot to be reopened so that they can then continue processing loans that are still in their queue, or those clients that are still waiting to submit their applications. Now, under the new, and just briefly under the new bill that's now hopefully in the desk of the president, there is going to be an additional, well, within the $310 billion, there's going to be $60 billion that's going to be dedicated to small community-based banks and credit unions. And there'll be more to come from that as the Treasury, which will be guiding the lenders as to who's included in there. But in terms of the size of banks, these are banks with probably less than $20 billion to $10 billion in size, which are traditionally your community banks that are in your area. And so that $60 billion will be dedicated through them which will allow for the small businesses that were left out in the first batch to be able to go into the smaller community banks and see if they can then apply for the payroll protection program under that amount of money that's been allocated to them. Next slide. And again, I know that I'm going a little bit ahead of myself, but when you're doing this now for over a month, you kind of realize that there are certain things that are kind of repetitive in nature, and so you remember this. And so when I'm speaking about it, it kind of just falls into place. So bear me if I jump ahead on a slide. But in terms of what this program is all about, it's really driven for payroll and employment. It's really to keep your business whole during an 8-week period. That was the time that was determined by the administration. That is what covers this COVID virus for businesses to be shut down or kind of not be shut down, but in the sense have that 8-week coverage for them to continue an operation. Like a restaurant might have had, say, 12 employees, now they only have 2, where they can still keep an operation while the 8-week period where this virus could basically go in what they're referring to as this level where the virus now recedes from the community so that the businesses can go back up and run. Now, this 8-week period technically begins from the time that you have your loan signed with the bank. So if today was my closing date with the bank, then the 8-week period would begin from today. And what the program entailed through Congress, or what Congress wanted the program to cover, basically would be your 8-week period of payroll, any mortgage interest or loan interest, rent, utility costs, and you would total that up, and then you would supply that information to your lender. Lenders across the nation probably are using different methods as to how they want the information provided to them, but they all have to use the same format that the Treasury and SBA wants the banks to use. So no matter what structure they're using, at the end, they're all using the same format. And again, it's to keep your employees whole. It's to keep your business whole. So if you started out, say, on week 1 with 5 employees and a payroll of 100,000, then you're supposed to end in the 8th week with 5 employees and a payroll of 100,000. As a result, when you provide the information on the payroll that you have 5 employees and $100,000 payroll, the SBA and the bank, well, rather the bank would be submitting this information to SBA, SBA would be responding and verifying it, and then you would be forgiven for that $100,000 after the 8-week coverage. Next slide. One of the key factors of the program is that salaries or payroll are capped at $100,000 per employee. So if you had an employee that's making $125,000, you would still report the employee in your payroll, but that salary would be capped at $100,000. Also, if you're a proprietor or you're a Schedule C and your income, all of this would be capped at $100,000. So there is this cap that would restrict the size of payroll for one individual. It doesn't, so if you have, say, 5 employees, each making $125,000, then you would be capping each employee at $100,000. Now, one of the other caveats within the program is that you can use up to 25% of your non-payroll expenses as part of your loan package. So that if you had, say, and I'm just using a hypothetical, $100,000 in payroll, rather $75,000 in payroll and $25,000 in the other expenses such as rent, mortgage, and utilities, that would total, say, $100,000. And The goal is to, at the end of your at the end of your 8-week period, that you would come back and present the lender with the proof that you've been paying those obligations during that 8-week period, and then the bank would make you whole by basically forgiving that portion of the loan. And for those that were concerned whether or not I have to be making a payment right after the 8 weeks or right after the first month, there is a deferral period of 6 months during the initial during the 6-month period that you started your loan with. Next slide. Now, under the economic injury disaster loans, which really started, if I was to just go back in time, in Connecticut, for instance, and nationally too, within the first week that began March 15, most states were preparing to declare their states for disaster under the SBA. And Connecticut was one of the first states back on the beginning of March 15 to have been declared a disaster, both to the administration as this information was prepared by the governor here in the state. One of the first programs that really got launched back on the 15th was this program called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. The payroll protection program was not yet rolled out. That was rolled out April 3rd, when the banks were ready to begin accepting loans. So between the 15th and the 3rd, basically most small businesses were applying directly to SBA through their portal for the economic injury disaster loan. And so that really became the initial or the first program that was actually launched back on the 15th or the 16th of March, and then through the end of March and then the first week of April, those were the program. That was the program that most businesses were applying for. Now, within that caveat of the economic injury disaster loan, there was the other program that was a subset within that, which was the advanced idle loan, which was when you went online, you noticed immediately that there was a window, a portal that would allow you to apply up to $10,000 for emergency assistance. So right after the 15th, then within a couple of, probably within a week to 10 days right after that, the $10,000 advance program was launched by SBA. Again, these programs were geared through the portal for the SBA portal. Then, so for the first 3 weeks of March, or really from the 15th through the 30th or the 31st of the end of the month, those were the programs that were available to any small business that was coming to SBA. So everything was being handled through the portals, through the SBA portal. And then moving forward, when the Senate and Congress convened, then the payroll protection program then was announced. Now, within the program, you will notice that the types of businesses that could apply. It basically in nature, any small business with less than 500 employees could apply for the original EIDL program. And then these could also have included small agricultural cooperatives. It could include aquaculture businesses. And one of the other interesting facets, it opened it up to non-for-profits and also to faith-based organizations. So the window of opportunity for small businesses and non-traditional small businesses just immediately grew in terms of opportunities for those that had difficulties in raising income during those weeks, and continue through this period right now, because there's still many businesses that have not opened, or if they are open, they're partially open, or they've lost sales because they depend on other businesses that are open to purchase their products. So because we're still in that phase of trying to help these businesses, the demand for these loans are really incredible. Next slide. And again, the new legislation that just got approved by Congress will replenish the EIDL loan by another $60 billion. So hopefully this is separate from the PPP loan. So the PPP loan will have its tranche of money so that they could immediately open the throttle so that the banks can immediately start taking in new applicants and also work on existing applicants that are on their pipeline. But the EIDL loan, which is the traditional SBA disaster loan, will have its own infusion of capital of money so that that program would be up and running. Next slide. Oh, in addition, under the new ruling for the program, farms have been included in that list of applicants now that can apply. In the original PPP program, traditional farms could not apply. So they did expand that under the new initiative. So that's written now into both the Senate and the congressional bill. And again, hoping that the president will sign this today, then that'll become into law. And so when the monies are rolled out, the farming community can now apply. Under the EIDL loan, again, just so we could look at what that program originally entailed, it really is a program to help you capitalize your business through working capital. So it would cover much more than the PPP program, because the PPP program really is to keep your business in operation through employment, through maintaining your staffing. But the economic injury disaster loan is more working capital, is designed to give you up to $2 million, and it has a higher interest of 3.75%. The PPP program is just for 2 years and is capped at 1%, and we'll talk a little bit more about that one. But the traditional EIDL program is for $2 million at 3.75%, and it's up to 30 years. So this is more of a permanent help and boost to your business to make sure that here you can operate way beyond just the 8 weeks, but for the entirety of whatever your situation is to make you whole. Now, again, whether it's the PPP or the EIDL, this is not, these are programs that have been developed so that cash flow is provided to your business, is not to purchase trucks, is not to do renovations in your business, is not to buy that new refrigeration equipment I need. It is not for that. It's just strictly for fixed cost or variable cost within your business. If it's an EIDL loan, and then if it's a PPP loan, it's strictly for the payroll component, yet they threw in this caveat that you can't include rent and such. Also on the EIDL loan, you can include rent and other utilities in there. So the similarity between both is that it's to provide you the capital, the short-term capital you need, but at the same time, one's going to provide you the longer capital you're going to need, which is the EIDL loan program. Next slide. Now, this is that second tranche of programs that were launched right after the EIDL loan program, and that was the $10,000 advance. And that program, again, all of the existing disaster programs, whether it's the EIDL, the advance, or the PPP, basically, if you go into our website, you will notice that the website will tell you until there's advanced refunding through Congress, you would not have access to either the EIDL Pro Advance or the EIDL traditional EIDL loan program, and also the PPP. If you actually spoke to a lender, they'll tell you the same thing. They will probably either take your information, but they right now have the inability of putting in your information to help you with the loan. Now, if you've already been approved, then yes, if you're already on the queue and they gave you an approval and SBA confirmed that, they're just probably waiting to get to you with all the volume of other loans that they also got approved. They have to set up some kind of a closing arrangement so that they can provide you with the money. So on the EIDL advance, that was more, they were looking at this more as an advance slide, kind of an advance that can be converted to a forgiven or a grant. It all depends on how you were using the money. If you had it tied to the EIDL loan and you were getting the other piece of the EIDL component and you were also getting the advance, then the advance would become a grant. But if the advance was to be used along with your PPP, then that advance would be also added into your loan. So that would be the distinction between one and the other. Next slide. And again, as I had just mentioned, the difference between both of them, there is some caveats within the EIDL program that if and again, it's structured more of a traditional type of loan where the SBA would be looking at hard assets, collateral. But if the loan is less than $25,000 on the EIDL loan, that would have been unsecured. Anything above $200,000 would require guarantees. Anything above 500,000, they would look at other collateral as well. Unlike the PPP program, which we'll go over in a few minutes, there are some differences involved in terms of guarantees and collateral. But when you look at the EIDL program, you have to look at it a little bit more of a traditional type of loan, except under the disaster program. They're not looking at this as a bank loan. They're looking just basically to secure the loan, but collateral is not the reason why they're making the EIDL loan. So don't concern yourselves about collateral for the EIDL loan. Just present what you have, and hopefully SBA will work with you to get you that money with or without collateral. Next slide. Now, right now, in terms of how to apply, as I had mentioned earlier, right now, if you went onto the SBA's website, you'll be able to go through all of the differences, all the different programs, the advanced, the EIDL, and the PPP, except you would not have any access to work with any of those three programs, basically because of the funding. And so once the funding is up and running, hopefully the programs would be back up, and so you can actually have access to them on the SBA's portal. Now the PPP program, just remember, that is through the bank. So you need to go to the bank, not SBA. They have all your information. So you need to, and I'm certain Mark Cutler would be talking about that also in terms of the importance to making sure you have contact with the lenders under the PPP program. You do have some sites there that you can reach out to if you're concerned as to where your existing EIDL loan is at. I don't have a portal. I can't look at where your EIDL is. So if you were to call me, I'd have to try to reach out to our disaster folks. And so it's not something that I have access here, nor any of my staff members have access to any of the portals for the EIDL loan. So usually we refer the client to contact the SBA's Disaster Customer Service Center, which is that number you see there, that 1-800-659-2955. So that's your first stop. If you're concerned that your EIDL loan is still, you haven't heard anything from SBA, just to let you know that is almost a manual process. When we were introduced to the EIDL back on the 15th, we already knew back then that it was going to take anywhere from 21 days to 30 days to get an application process. So knowing that, and the volume of applications across the country, not just in Connecticut, New York, Maine, the number of applicants that have gone through this program probably is added to the slowness of the Office of Disaster Assistance in getting back to you. But again, reach out, call that 1-800 number and see if they can provide you any assistance and guidance as to where your EIDL loan program is, your application is. Next slide. Now, this is basically what's in here. And again, there's a multitude of items that went through Congress and the Senate and the President. We're up to this 3.5 in terms of money programs that have been approved by Congress. The 3.5 is a new addition of the funding that just got approved by Congress, and hopefully that would get approved today by the President. So, and again, I'm just like you, I would have to wait until that is enacted, because the minute that that is approved, then SBA Washington and our headquarters would then immediately start working on, either changing, adding, modifying any of the programs that were in existence under the original bill that now need to be modified or amended because of the changes for the new amount. So that's why, for myself, if you would have asked me where exactly what does this all mean under the, I could talk to you about the existing program, but with the new addition, I have to wait until that is reviewed by headquarters, both Treasury and SBA, and then they will be issuing the new changes or the modifications or no changes under the program. Now, here's where, and Mark Cutler and myself, and I've talked to a number of people, it's important that, the audience and everyone that's listening to me, get the paperwork in. If you're going to procrastinate and you think that this is going to be around for another 2 weeks, I don't think so. The amount of applications that were put through in phase 1 was over 1 million, and 349 billion were used up in just 14 days. And so, and this is with people just ramping up and banks ramping up. On the second tranche, more people know, more businesses know, the banks are more prepared. So understanding that, I don't know whether this is going to last 3 weeks, a month, but I do tell you is that if you get your applications in on time, the minute that the funding is made available, contact your bank. If you already have an application in that bank, you need to reach out to them. It is very important that you get some kind of response from that lender that your application will get processed and that it will not be set aside because they did not process it in the original batch of money. And it's up to the lenders. Some lenders are holding on to the application and will submit it. Others might say, because we did not submit it in the first tranche, the second tranche, we're going to start all over again. So please make sure you communicate with your lenders to make sure that your applications are in process, and if they are, what level, and where's my account number. Because, you need an account number or some verification from them. Not that your loan is in process. You want to know that there is a number behind that and that you have a commitment from them that the money will be dispersed. Once you get that, whether it gets dispersed today or next week, you have a commitment from them. The Treasury had issued an advice to the banks that they have 10 days to close from the time they got the authorization from SBA. And the authorization is pretty quick. So the minute the bank would input that information, within a day or less than a day, SBA provides them with the authorization number, which allows them to close. So right after the bank got that number, they're supposed to close within 10 days, not 2 weeks, not 3 weeks, but within 10 days. Next slide. Now, when we first started with the program back on the 15th of March here in Connecticut, and probably different dates within the states that we're, that are on the here today, we started with traditional banks, credit unions, the farm credit system. Today, many other partners are now on the system in terms of approvals by both Treasury and SBA, that they can provide the PPP program, not the EIDL. The EIDL program is run through SBA. The PPP program is run through the banks. And so we've been spending a lot of time here in Connecticut making sure that especially credit unions. In the last 3 weeks, we had a number of credit unions that were not traditional SBA lenders, and they immediately submitted their paperwork and now have the authority to lend under the PPP program. And most of the banks in the state, I would believe probably 90+% of the banks in the state of Connecticut are now PPP lenders. And so please look at your own state and make sure that when you do call your lender, that they're set up to do this, because you need to find a lender that is a PPP lender that's going to provide the access, not only for you to submit the information, but for you to get an approval in a relatively short time, because of the need to make sure that you get an approval from them. Next slide. And again, community-based lenders, small banks, credit unions, nationally, and from what I'm hearing, they have a shorter, I wouldn't say process, but a shorter ability of being able to reach out to the business community. And so contact, if you already haven't, or you haven't really gotten far in your process, by all means, reach out to the small banking community, your community banks, because they're all up and running. And that might be the best bet in the sense that, especially now that there's going to be an allocated amount of money that's going to be for the small community banks. So they might be the ones that are going to be open to lend in the next couple of days, while the rest of the bigger banks might have ran out of the total funding in the program. The community banks have a larger chunk of it now. So again, you have to wait until the White House signs on the bill, President Trump, and then immediately thereafter, hoping by Monday or Tuesday, we'll have guidance from Treasury outlining the small community banks and how most of us can go to them and immediately apply for funding. But again, you could go to the SBA.gov website. They actually have a portal to check all your banks. So look at different ways you could speak to SCORE, but they also can be a conduit to helping you find and negotiate through the number of banks that are in your area. Next slide. This is Mark Cutler, myself. We've been talking about who are these non-bank participants, and there they are. Those are the non-bank participants that have the size and muscle to take on this big responsibility of providing cash immediately to small businesses. And you could see the list of these. These are what you call fintechs. PayPal, QuickBooks went on to the process. Square would be the company that does your merchant processing. On Deck is a lender. Funding Circle, Cabbage, Fundera, Lendio. They've all have been approved by the the Treasury and SBA to be lenders. And so these are temporary lenders. They're not SBA in the sense that the minute this funding is gone and the act, the CARES Act moves on, they no longer have the ability, because they would have to be 7A lenders for them to be traditional SBA lenders. But because of the CARES Act, they have the ability to sign forms and get approval to do the same thing as a bank can. There is no difference in rate, there is no difference in terms, and there's no difference in documentation. So there are no fees. The PPP program and the EIDL program have no fees attached to them. So you should not be concerned about a fee, a closing fee, a broker fee, anything like that. These programs are for you to submit your information, get them through their portal. I'm certain they'll be reaching out to you and get the approval loan.
Julio, if I can just add one thing, it's Mark Cutler. This is sort of like applying to universities. You can apply to 20 universities, but you'll only go to one. What Julio is saying, you may already have a PPP application in, but we're encouraging you to look at as many of these opportunities as we see on this page, and the community banks in your area, to just hedge your bets. There's no law against applying to 30 of these just to do your contingency planning. Banks that you have the PPP in today may already have their queue fully established, fully utilized. So we're just encouraging you to take all contingency planning into effect. Go ahead, Julio.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for reminding me. So if you haven't heard from your lender back and you can't get a hold of them, please reach out to another lender, contact one of the fintechs, and it's on a first come, first serve. So whoever puts in your application in and gets that authorization, that will lock your money. So the other lender would be out because there would not be duplication of funding. So again, look at all avenues of getting this money to you. So unless you get a good response from your lender, please look for other ways of getting this money to you. And again, these fintechs are there. You could contact them. They're on the internet. You just go right on. They don't have access because, like everyone else, they'll tell you on their screen that the funding is not available. They're waiting for the refunding of the program. But the minute the program opens up, I think some of them are taking applications, and then they will contact you once the funding's in place. So again, just do your homework. Next slide. And this is what's interesting in terms of to understand that 80% of small businesses that apply for a loan, we're still waiting for an answer, which is, again, some banks, the bigger the bank, the higher the volume. And so many banks were just caught off guard in terms of the magnitude of businesses that were applying. And since this is a data inputting, they need staffing. And so most of them took a while for them to ramp up. And so I would imagine there are applications right now that are sitting there at these banks, and that the minute the money is available, these applications would be immediately inputted. So that might be where your application is at right now. But confirm. That's the most important thing, that your application will get processed. Don't sit back thinking that I put it in, I submitted my paperwork, but you have no confirmation. That's very important. So, and again, just remember, you can apply at another location, another lender. You won't be able to double dip because the system will immediately reject the secondary application if it's submitted. Next slide. Mark, do you want to talk about this slide here, or do you want me to, or how do you want to?
Yeah, I will just say that we have we've had a lot of experience with feedback from our clients. The four-stage process that the application has been received right up to the loan is funding. Most banks are telling you where it is in the process. In general, if you're at the application received process, it would probably be unlikely that your loan would be processed, and the bank would be telling you that. We're emphasizing that we need to develop a contingency plan, reaching out to other funding sources. Thank you. Julio?
Yes, I was just reading some of the questions. The EIDL program is through the SBA, it's not through the banks. That's the traditional SBA loan program. So the EIDL program, when it's up and running, you would be going through the SBA's portal in the SBA.gov website. That is not through the bank. The bank is just strictly the CARES Act program, better known as the Payroll Protection Program. So just be aware of the distinctions between one and the other. And again, that the highlight in the bottom there is important. Communication. Make sure you get some solid response from your lender that your loan is in the queue, or that you have an authorization number that says, yep, here's my number. Now I just sit back and wait for my money. Without that, keep calling. Next slide. This is because of this particular slide. This is as of the Treasury, U.S. Treasury's notices that were just released today, yesterday, last night. And this is as a pushback because of the large corporations, publicly traded companies that were applying for the payroll protection program. They've added a caveat now that large companies need to provide evidence that they're being affected by the COVID virus and the shutdowns. So it's no longer I wouldn't say a free ride, but they need to provide evidence that one, they do not have the ability to raise capital elsewhere, which most large corporations could. Raise capital either through the investment market or through their banks because of their unique size and scope of their operations. But now it limits them without them being able to prove that they have access to capital. So if they do and they can provide, then they can no longer apply for the PPP. So this would limit, say, those companies that you were reading about in the newspapers, whether it was the large chain retailers or anything like that. They would now have to provide evidence that they were impacted by the COVID and they cannot get or they cannot raise capital. Next slide. Oh, easy question. Yes, you can apply both for the EIDL and the PPP. Now, just because you can apply for both, you cannot duplicate the funding. So if you can't basically double dip. So if I'm getting payroll covered in my EIDL loan, then I should be transferring that portion over to my PPP. The EIDL does not have a grant or a forgiveness feature to it. So if I took $100,000 in payroll under the EIDL, then I'm going to have a $100,000 loan for the next 30 years. Whereas if I transferred that portion over to the PPP, then I will have a forgiveness after 8 weeks. So that would be, that's the beauty of the PPP program, that the EIDL will be whatever you included within the EIDL, and it includes payroll, and then you need to, especially if you apply for the PPP. If you didn't apply for the PPP and you only have the EIDL, then you're going to have a traditional loan for 30 years. But if you do have a PPP approved, then you should move over that payroll so you could have it forgiven in 8 weeks. Next slide.
So
Okay,
we turn
Julio.
it over to questions.
Sure.
Julio, thank you very much. We have many questions. In the time available, I'll try to hit on the ones that may impact the most number of firms and people on the phone here. A number of questions from people that started their business before mid-February this year, but have not been in business very long. They don't have any significant revenue. They're one or two person businesses. Can they apply for the PPP, and how would they be able to determine their payroll number, so to speak, determine the amount they can borrow?
Well, they have to be in existence before February 15th. If
Yes.
they weren't, so that's the key. So if they were in existence February 15th and back, they would just have to look at 3 months of their payroll and then kind of project out. So if you know you have payroll coming after the 15th, then the SBA would consider that. You just have to remember the payroll is an average of it's supposed to be an average of 1 year. So the way the formula is for the PPP program, you're supposed to look at 2019 and then average it out for 12 months and then multiply that by 2.5 times. That would give you, that 2.5 times is supposed to be the 8 weeks. So they would use a similar formula to help you understand the calculations, because you do have an existing payroll. And so moving forward, you have to find the capital to pay your employees because your business was up and running before February 15th.
Okay.
There is some guidance on that. I can send that over to SCORE and they could look at that.
Okay, thank you, Julio. If you get a PPP loan and you bring back all your people and therefore the loan can be forgiven, but what if you bring back, let's say, only about half of the people during the subsequent time period? What percent of the PPP loan is forgiven?
It's prorated, so you'd have to do your calculations during that 8-week period. If you could hire new people to replace the new people, more power to you, because now you could continue to operate and try to meet those numbers that you started with.
Okay. What advice would you give for people who are operating a business? It's a restaurant as an example where due to the lockdown, they're not able to reopen. They like to get a loan, but they obviously can't reopen. Can they defer bringing the people back until after they're allowed to reopen?
That's been a question. The clock starts ticking the minute you get your loan. And so you got 8 weeks within that period of time to utilize the funds. If not, the balance would be converted into a term loan, or you return back the money that you did not use. You in a restaurant where you only have, say, 2 people, say 5 people, and you're open, but you only have 2, you might be able to keep the other 3 at home, paying them through the program, knowing that they're still employees, but they cannot work at your location because of the way the state mandated that only takeout food would be the only venue for you. You would not be able to do sit-down meals. The issue would then fall to the state in terms Department of Labor, and find out what their requirements are in terms of trying to call back your employee. Because the employee cannot get paid from both sides. If you call your employee and he does not want to work because he's collecting or she's collecting, then that's an issue with DOL.
Okay. For someone that does not currently have a relationship with an SBA lender, do you have any advice for them on how they should best apply for a PPP loan?
Oops, say that again. I'm sorry, what was the question?
For someone that does not currently have a relationship with an SBA lender, what advice would you give them in terms of applying for a PPP loan?
Well, you saw the fintechs that were listed there. Also, the small community banks, most of them will take you on. Some of them just require you to open a business account. There is some caveat in the sense that the only thing that the banks need is that they need to know their customer. This thing called the Bank Secrecy Act, BSA, requires them that before they provide funding or open work with a client, that client needs to have some kind of a relationship with the bank, and usually that's an account. And so that might be a caveat. You just need to talk to the lender. If that's not a requirement, then But each bank, we cannot dictate to a bank how they handle their business affairs. You'd have to find that out yourself. But if you're interested in a non-bank lender, the fintechs are there.
Okay, this may be a related question. Will a PPP lender take into account credit score in terms of whether allow loan?
No, only the idle, because that's almost a traditional loan. The PPP, you're not guaranteeing that. There is no collateral. So if you have 5 owners, there are no 5 security agreements for them. They don't sign a collateral agreement. They don't sign personal guarantees. All the SBA is requiring that someone is responsible for this information and that they're authorized to sign on behalf of the corporation or company, but there is no credit scores being reported through the PPP program.
Okay, very good. Another question is, did the allocation of the PPP money, so to speak, vary by state, or is it allocated by state? So for somebody that has operations in a different state, does it matter what state they apply through?
No, there is no allocation. It's first come, first served. So whatever you're applying for at that bank, that's what they're going to make you whole on.
Okay. For the idle loan, the time frame for the PPP loan is you must be in business before mid-February. Does the idle loan have the same requirement?
You could be a startup for the idle loan. So if you were about to open on February 15, and you could justify that you put in money and you did all of this improvements in there and you never got the business to open, the idle probably would be the way to go. Because if you think about it, if on February 15 you weren't open, you're in payroll and in your employees, that's the goal of the PPP program, is to make you whole through your payroll. The idle can go a little bit further because that's working capital to cover your expenses and your rent since you were shut down, you know, whether it was on the 15th or shortly thereafter.
Okay, good. Question of somebody who's self-employed and therefore doesn't really have a payroll, they're collecting whatever's left after their expenses. What's the best way for them to calculate what that payroll number would be for the purposes of the loan calculation?
It's their, on Schedule C would be their net income on the bottom.
Okay, good.
Because that's technically his income. So the 8-week amount would also be included for that.
Okay, this is a tax question. I don't know if this is right for you, Julio, but if a PPP loan is, well, assuming they are forgiven after this time period, you know if the income is, the forgiven income is taxable to them?
No, from my understanding, no. But again, talk to your accountant, but I think it's not, both on the idle and on the advance and on the PPP.
Okay, finally, I have time for one more question here. If somebody applied for a PP loan under the original program, did not get it, has since furloughed employees, so they have fewer active employees now, should they reapply? And if they reapply, what's the number of employees that would count? The prior number or the current lower number?
Well, under the PPP, you could only have one loan. So if you already have the loan, that number stands. You're looking at last year's payroll, and you make whatever adjustments if you're not bringing in all those employees, because at the end of the 8-week period, that's what you're providing to the lender, that you started with 4 employees and you ended with 4 employees, and my payroll was X. If you wind up with 2, but you started with 4, is going to be prorated based on that. So information, keep records separate, you know, whatever the funding, keep it short and simple so that you have good records towards the 8-week period, that you could justify the full load of use of that money from the amount of money that the bank allocated to you based on the information you provided them.
Okay, so if they applied for the PPP loan originally but did not get it, they're now applying and they have fewer employees, Is it right that they would be subject to the fewer employee number in terms of calculating the payroll and what their commitment is?
If they have applied, that means that they never got an approval. It's almost like starting all over again.
Okay, very good. All right, unfortunately, Julio, that's all the time we have for Q&A. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Julio. And as a reminder, a recording of this webinar and the materials are available within a couple of days on fairfieldcounty.score.org website. Our next webinar will be this Monday evening, April 27th at 6 p.m. The topic is email newsletters, why it's worth the effort, and how to get the most out of yours, with Belinda Wasser presenting. Again, SCORE offers free individual counseling, so please use the link on the screen or visit our website and click Request a Mentor. Also, please fill out your evaluations that have been sent at the end of the webinar. On behalf of SCORE, I'd like to thank you all for attending SCORE's live webinar. And in closing today, a big thank you to Julio Castellano for presenting today. Have a nice day, everyone.
Thank you.